Welcome to another episode of the Upper Bowl Perspective, a Utah Jazz podcast showing that the fans sitting in the nosebleeds know just as much as those sitting courtside. And Kyler, Landon, great to chat with you as always. And we have actually quite a bit to talk about. This last week, we had the Las Vegas Summer League, and one of the biggest storylines coming out of all of those games and all of those players, not just for the Jazz, but for the NBA as a whole, has been Keyonte George. Now, we talked quite a bit about Keyonte when the Jazz drafted him at number 16. There were a couple players that we may have liked a little bit better than him at that position at the time, most notably Jalen Hood-Schifino and Cam Whitmore. But after seeing him play not only in the Salt Lake Summer League, but also in the Vegas Summer League, it looks like he is definitely on a mission to prove everyone wrong that he was worth higher draft consideration. Just to give some of the stats, in his 3 Vegas Summer League games, he averaged 21.7 points, 2.7 rebounds, and 6.3 assists and a steal in just 25 minutes a game. And on top of that, he had that amazing game against the Clippers where he went 33 with 10 assists and 6 3-pointers, which was one of the most impressive performances we've seen in any Summer League game across the entire league. As we've been watching Keyonte George show that he's looking like the steal of the draft right now, what has come to mind in terms of what do you think we may have gotten just a little bit wrong on Keyonte George when we were evaluating him in the draft process?
Well, I think we got a lot wrong. I mean, obviously, this is a small sample size looking at Vegas, but looking back at what I said on the last podcast, he made me look dumb as hell because I had some critiques and he addressed all of those incredibly in Vegas League. I think specifically playmaking, I know that's the big one that we've talked about a lot. He averaged over 6 assists during his few Summer League games, so that's good to see. Another thing I think is his impact. Looking at his box score, in addition to those great stats that he had and the efficiency that he did it at, he was a plus 15. So, again, I think that speaks to his good decision-making. I think that speaks to good defense. So I think really overall he impressed me this Summer League. I think he really changed my opinion on him.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think I've always liked the flashes that Keyonte George has shown, and he just showed them a lot more consistently in Vegas League. He just stepped his game up a notch for sure from what we saw. All the flashes that we saw in the Utah League that we like, he just decided that he was going to do that every game. And so he was awesome. Yeah, offensively, he was really incredible. My biggest thing is that in college, he had a lot of turnovers, which kind of helped me down. He had a negative assist to turnover ratio. But what I think I probably missed there is that was just a weird situation where there was always 3 guards on the court for Baylor, and he was playing small forward. And he's just a guy that, because he's not extremely explosive, he's going to be better when he's guarded by guards and not the other team's small forward. And so I think the fact that he's been able to play against guards here in the Summer League and his limited NBA experience so far has certainly helped him. And so probably taking into account more that he played small forward out of position a lot last year in college, and maybe giving it a little bit more of a pass on that and trusting in the flashes, which is something I always do. I always trust flashes more than I do what the guy does, every single day. And so I was never not a fan of Keyonte George. It's just I wanted Jalen Hood-Schifino more, and Keyonte George has certainly closed that gap.
I think Kyler brings up a main point because when the Jazz drafted Keyonte George, it was with the intention that he was going to be our point guard. And with him playing not a whole lot of point guard at Baylor, it was interesting to see how would he translate into that passer, because that negative assist to turnover ratio was one of the major reasons why I had him a little bit lower on my draft board. In the Vegas Summer League, his assist to turnover ratio was 2.7, which is a really solid number. Now, granted, this is on a small sample size. We completely understand that. But the fact that moving into more of a guard position rather than that forward position he was playing at Baylor, and really that focus on passing, he's certainly much more developed as a passer than I would have guessed, which is something that I got wrong. I saw the flash he had at Baylor, and I saw that he could maybe become a passer down the road, but I didn't think his impact as a passer would be this significant and this immediate. Now, that being said, just as there's a huge talent and play style gap between college to summer league, there's also a very significant gap between summer league and then the NBA. Keyonte George has certainly impressed us so far. How much of this do you think is going to translate immediately to the NBA? Or are there any flashes or games that we've seen that we think isn't going to translate well when he actually starts playing against legitimate NBA competition?
For me, I think he's a quick learner. I think if you look, we were there at the very first summer league game when he was trying some pretty risky passes, and one of them worked and some of them didn't. And I think he learned to change things up. And so I think kind of some of the more risky things he tries, he might learn that he's not getting away with, and I think he'll adapt. And so I think he'll be fine. Offensively, I think he's kind of ready to go. I've seen enough. He creates space with ease. Like, if he wants to get a clean shot off, he's going to do it. He's just really good at that. And he's done a great job of getting to the free throw line, which always is going to help out your in-game efficiency. So I think offensively, he's a ready to contribute kind of player. Defensively, though, he still concerns me. He was pretty rough at times at the summer league. And I just want to see, he showed flashes of that at Baylor too, and I just want to see that maybe show up a little bit more. If you want him to get consistent minutes at the NBA, which I do, I think all of us want Keyonte George to get consistent minutes in the NBA, contrary to maybe some's belief. But I think, yeah, defense might be the big difference. He wasn't great in summer league, and it's a lot harder to guard NBA guards than it is summer league guards. So I think that probably will be his toughest transition in my eyes.
I agree with the offensive side of the ball. I think that's going to translate immediately. I mean, what impressed me in summer league wasn't just kind of the numbers he put up, but how he put them up. The way that he used his speed, he was very shifty. He's very his ability to kind of change speeds and maintain control was very impressive to me. And the fact that he always seemed on balance when he was scoring was something that was, again, very impressive to me. I think a lot of times there's a trade-off between your ability to create space and your ability to kind of keep your balance and, put up high percentage shots. He showed the ability to do both. So I do think that he could be a very immediate kind of offensive scorer based off of what we've seen in summer league so far. I don't think he's going to be as efficient as he was there. I mean, he shot over 50% from the field, over 40% from three. I'd be shocked if he did that his rookie year. Hoping he does, but I don't think it's likely.
Yourself?
Yeah, fingers crossed. The playmaking is interesting. It looked a lot better in Vegas than it did in Salt Lake, but I still think, the way that defenses are ran in the NBA at that level, it's going to make those kind of reads that he was making in summer league a lot harder. I think he might be baited into some bad passes and turn the ball over. So I think that's where I'd maybe hope to see some more improvement, is just some more intelligent, high basketball IQ decision making and passing.
Which I think in just the comments you made there, Landon, I think there's two things I want to dive into just a little bit more and get our thoughts on. One of them is the efficiency, because dude was insanely efficient in the summer league. Pulling up the numbers right now, he shot 52.3% from the field in those 3 Vegas summer league games, and he shot 44.5% from 3 on 9 attempts per game. Now, those are elite numbers if you're playing that in the NBA. I mean, if he was shooting 45% from 3, that puts him in whatever the highest upper echelon tier is. And I mean, with the 50-40-90, he had the 50-40, which is extremely impressive efficiency. So I don't think we're going to see that when he translates into the NBA. But at the same time, one of my biggest worries for Keyonte when I was going through the draft process is that I was worried on what his efficiency would look like. Now, granted, the goal is that he would become more efficient over time, but I was certainly expecting him to be maybe low 40s from the field and maybe mid 30s from three this year. And at least the flashes he's shown us at Summer League, it seems like he's going to be better than that. If you had to guess, how efficient do you think he's actually going to look at the NBA level this year?
You literally answered this question last podcast. You asked us the same question. But my numbers hasn't changed. I think he's going to be a guy that's in the 40s.
Yeah, you did ask it last time, but I think it's worth readdressing, at least for me, because I think his performance in Summer League definitely changed my perspective a little bit on that. I was pretty low on what I thought he could be efficiency wise. I think he can be more efficient now. Again, like what I've seen, based off his ability to create space but still have control, still be able to kind of get wherever he wants on the floor. I think I want to revise that. I think he'll be a little more efficient. I could see him being in the mid 40s. It's a field goal percentage. Hopefully, mid to high 30s from three. His shot looks great. He's a little shorter, so I think, he's going to need the right matchups to be able to get that shot off cleanly in the NBA. But if he's open or if he, has the decent space, it looks like it should go in. So probably somewhere between like 35 to 39% is where I would expect that to hopefully be.
Which that's why I wanted to ask it again this week, because I think with what we saw in Summer League, specifically from the 3-point shooting, I think he gave us a lot more hope in terms of what he can become earlier on in his career. Now, I'm not going to turn around and say I think he's going to be incredibly efficient his rookie season, but certainly the shot-making ability, especially from the 3-point range, from what we saw in the Vegas Summer League compared to the Salt Lake Summer League, I think that was a significant enough of a difference that my expectations for him in efficiency as a player, I think definitely shifted a little bit. Not saying he's going to shoot 40% from three this year, but it seems like that could be something that he's able to work through over his first few seasons. The second part of Landon's comment I want to dive into a little bit was more about the defensive aspect and being able to stay in front of some of these players. It's been reported that since he left Baylor, declared for the NBA draft, and was drafted, that he lost 15 pounds. And when you look at the tape from Summer League compared to what he looked like at Baylor, especially Baylor late in the season, he certainly does look a lot quicker, a lot more nimble. His lateral quickness looks a little bit better, and just how easy he's able to stop and start seems to have improved significantly. How much do you think that him deciding to slim down a little bit is going to impact his ability to be a quality on-ball defender?
It just turns you into a different type of defender, I think. Like you look at a Royce O'Neal, who was never quick, but was a strong defender. That's because he's really well built. Then you look at a lot of the other defenders, he's just more of a quick defender. So you sacrifice, strength and quickness is kind of a balance that every player has to find out where their body is best utilized, right? Are they better using strength over quickness? Or are they better using quickness over strength? I think that's going to be an adjustment for Keyonte, and that's why I think that's where he needs the most development. I trust in both Keyonte as a worker and Will Hardy's the coach to help him out in that area. I think he's just not used to probably not being as strong as he used to be in college. I felt like in college, his defensive flashes were because, he was strength and he was strong and he wasn't getting bullied by on drives. And now he's just got to really work on getting 100% good in the right spot because of his quickness. And so I don't think it changes anything in terms of his defensive potential. It just changes the kind of defender he's going to be if he keeps his body type.
Yeah, I think to Kyler's point, there's a trade-off that comes with that. He should be, a little quicker, a little more nimble, which I think is what we knew. I think it's a strategic trade-off. It's one that the Jazz would need. I think we need someone who's a little better at guarding guards versus someone who's better at guarding forwards. We've got so many players now that can kind of guard their other teams, 3 to 5. So I think having someone who can stay in front of the guards, which was an issue we had last year, is probably the right decision. I think if we're going to go all in, at least for him to be a defender, let's go on him being a good on-ball guard defender. I think that's what we need, and I think that's where he has the highest potential. So I'm glad this is the direction that they're going, that he's losing the weight, that he's trying to increase that lateral quickness, because I think it's the right decision.
And I think it's exciting with Keyonte. I mean, we talked about this after we saw him first in the Salt Lake Summer League, just how it seemed like he had really accepted, at least at that point, his role, and he was trying to develop on those things that were going to make him into the best NBA player based on his size and his skill set. And I think him dropping that weight really shows that when he was at Baylor, he needed that extra weight because he was guarding forwards and he needed to win by strength. And the fact that within just a few months, he was able to drop the weight and really change what his quote unquote defensive calling card should be, which would be that quickness, I think bodes really, really well for what kind of player he can become, because it shows such great foresight and great understanding that I was a great player at Baylor. I was considered a lottery pick for most of the year. I ended up going 16. However, I realized that the way that I played as one of the best college players in the country is not going to be the way that I have to play to be the most successful in the NBA. And I love guys who are able to accept their role and really excel in their role. And everything that I've seen from Keyonte so far, from the passing, from the size, from that emphasis on efficiency, I think it all bodes extremely well for him, because if he's completely bought into, I'm going to become a point guard in this league, then I think that just shows that the Jazz got an incredible, not only player, but somebody who's an incredible teammate with an incredible mindset that will be able to continue to propel his game and then therefore the Jazz forward.
You know how long I've been telling myself that I'm going to lose 15 pounds and then haven't?
If you had like a hired chef and whole training staff dedicated to you losing 15 pounds, I'm sure you'd lose it pretty quickly. Unfortunately, you are your own training staff and dietitian and all this stuff, which does make the process a little bit harder. But just to emphasize, we all love Keyonte George on this podcast. It's clear we all maybe have slightly different opinions, but all of us are really high on him. I just felt like after last podcast, apparently that wasn't a clear sentiment. We've loved Keyonte. We were disappointed on draft night that it wasn't Jalen Hood-Schifino, but ever since, like we said we would on draft night, we buy into the players that the Jazz get, and we hope for their success. We're definitely doing that with Keyonte, and we're definitely very excited about what we've seen thus far early in his career.
Oh, 100%. And when you spend as much time as we do going through all the draft prospects, we get passionate about who we like in the draft, and we all just happen to love Jalen Hood-Schifino and Cam Whitmore, who are both available for the Jazz at 16. But that being said, if I have to choose between being right on my big board or being wrong and the Jazz getting the better prospect, which at least with the small sample size, this seems to be a case, I will take the Jazz being right over myself 100 times out of 100. And I mean, Jalen Hood-Schifino's looked pretty decent. Cam Whitmore's had some big games as well, but Keontae's definitely been the best performer out of the three of them so far. So I'm stoked to have Keyonte George. He was my third option when the Jazz took him at 16. And I hope that he's better than both those players by a long shot. And if I'm wrong, I will happily own up to the fact that I was wrong with the two players that I had in front of him, because it's better for the Jazz and it's better for the franchise. So I'm ecstatic about who we've gotten, and I'm very excited to see how he continues to develop and grow within our organization. All right. So one last thing I want to hit about on Keyonte. I think it's always fun to have those conversations where you don't have nearly large enough of a sample size to make any like major predictions about the future of a player, but they're fun conversations. So I want to have it anyway. There's been a couple of All-NBA guards who have shown out in Summer League, and that was really the first time where we could see that this player is going to be amazing in the NBA, and this is something that we should watch out for. And two names specifically came to mind that I was thinking about, guards who were able to kind of give a little bit of a I'm here moment in Summer League. One of them, Dame Lillard. We saw how he won the Summer League MVP, like however long ago that was, I think 11 years ago. And being drafted out of Weber State so highly, there were definitely some questions based on the quality of his competition and everything else, if he was going to be a legitimate NBA player. And he was able to put all of those I guess, haters to doubt in that moment because of what he was able to show in Summer League. Looking at even a little more close to home, look at what Donovan Mitchell did. He was definitely one of the stars of the Summer League the year that he played, especially on the defensive end. I believe at Vegas Summer League, he averaged something ridiculous like 6 steals per game while he was out there, and then also showed more as a scorer than I think people anticipated from his time at Louisville. So here's my question. After that long preamble, Keyonte George has been arguably the best guard playing in Summer League so far. He's been extremely impressive. Do you think that if he were to continue to make those leaps to eventually being an all-NBA caliber guard, like a Donovan Mitchell or like a Damian Lillard, which current or former player do you think he's going to be most similar to?
I think his best comp of all NBA caliber players at one point in their career is probably Bradley Beal.
All right. That's a good one. I would probably say Donovan Mitchell. I think he showed the same type of scoring prowess as Donovan Mitchell and like the style of scoring. He's not as athletic. I guess Donovan was pretty athletic when he first came to the league, got some very impressive dunks, but like what he's turned into now is more of like, a score off the screen, score off, create your space style of play is more of what I see Keyonte George being in the NBA. And I think the way that they score is going to look pretty similar once he gets into the league.
I think both of those are pretty good comps. Bradley Beal was actually the first one that I thought of as well, Kyler. I was also wondering maybe a slightly bigger Jalen Brunson. I mean, like, granted, saying that Jalen Brunson is NBA caliber guard, like that may be a little bit of a stretch, although I believe he was in the conversation for third team this year. But I think with Keyonte George, we're not looking for someone who's going to be a lockdown defender on the defensive end and then an amazing scorer. I don't think that's necessarily his future. But I think someone who is a competent defender, who can be a very high level scorer and passer, is more likely the mold that he's eventually going to grow into over time, which is why I think the Bradley Beal and the Donovan Mitchell comps are so good. Granted, Donovan's been getting a little bit better on defense and he has that ridiculous wingspan and he's a little bit of a better athlete, but I would certainly hope that over time, even if Keyonte George isn't as great of a scorer as Bradley Beal when he was winning those scoring titles, then maybe he can be a little bit more of an impactful defender and not a complete sieve on the defensive end. It's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with Keyonte George over the course of the season. Right now, if you had to put a guess on it, what do you think his chances are of being an all-rookie?
All rookie. Well, I guess it depends on how many games he starts. J Bobby and I did the over under starts, and I'm feeling pretty good about the over. I think he's going to start more than whatever J Bobby's guess was just by himself. So, I'd say he's got I'd say if there's like a betting favorite, I bet he's one of the 5 favorites to be on all rookie after what we've seen in Summer League. So I would almost be more surprised if he didn't make it than surprised that he did at this point. But honestly, I don't think I'd be too surprised either way because NBA is a different beast, man.
Yeah. I mean, I would probably take the other side of that. I would probably give him, I don't know, maybe a 40-ish% shot of making all rookie team just because there are so many guards in this draft. Like the guard depth was crazy. He looked like one of the best guards, if not the best guard in the draft in Summer League. I would love for that to translate. And again, to your point, I wouldn't be surprised if he made all rookie team. But I think the fact that you've got a lot of talented guards that are probably going to be in positions where they're going to get a lot of time and a lot of, possessions right off the bat, I think it puts Keyonte at a disadvantage because I don't think he's going to begin the season starting if he gets to that point at some point.
Well, so I don't know how many of the guards are actually going to be starters either, though, and it's positionless, mind you. So 10 players, I don't know. I think he could be one of the 10 best players and most impactful in terms of minutes and stats and whatnot.
Yeah. I guess it comes down to when he's going to be starting, when he's going to be getting those real minutes. So I think that's what it's going to come down to.
I think playing time is going to be really important. I mean, I just look at some people that are going to play a lot of minutes right off the gate, like Victor Wembanyama, obviously going to play a lot of minutes out of the gate. Scoot, Amen Thompson's going to play a lot. I think Anthony Black's going to get more minutes in the first part of the career. It's like there's just a lot of guys that you can see playing a lot of minutes early on. Even like a Jalen Hood-Schifino, like just because of the guard depth with the Lakers, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a lot of minutes fairly early on because of just his size and his ability to pass. So I think a lot of it, depending on if he goes first team or second team, or if he makes it at all, is going to depend on how much he actually gets to play. But there's almost nobody who's had better flashes than him throughout all of summer league, and he's been extremely impressive throughout this entire process. So I think as long as he can get his minutes, that he will certainly be one of the strong contenders for one of those all rookie spots, which just makes me so excited to have another guy who can be a building block going forward. Well, boys, we just talked a lot about Keyonte George and how excited we are to see how he continues to develop with the Utah Jazz. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back. We're going to give our preseason awards for this Utah Jazz roster. Welcome back for part 2, where we're going to be discussing our preseason awards, where we're going to be predicting who is going to be the MVP for the Jazz this season, Defensive Player of the Year, etc. We're kind of at this weird part of the offseason where we just had Vegas Summer League. We're still kind of waiting for preseason and then, of course, the actual games to start. But we watch a lot of Jazz. We know a lot about these players. So it's always fun to go through and just consider, what do we think is going to happen with this roster this next season? So knowing that this is a way too early prediction and we don't have a ton of recent sample size for any of this, we're still going to go with it. And we're going to talk about what we think it's going to look like for the Jazz. Let's start off with the premier award in the league, which is the MVP, the Most Valuable Player Award. Now, this one seems fairly obvious based on last season, but Kyler and Landon, if you had to predict who's going to be the Jazz's most valuable player for the 2023-2024 season, who would you guess?
Oshagbaji. No. Larry Markkinen, I think, is the clear choice here. Was basically a shoe-in for All-NBA for the majority of the year until the Jazz kind of intentionally tanked at the end, which kind of took him out of it. But you have a caliber player like that, you rarely have anyone else that's really challenging him for MVP. And I know we've discussed the mere possibility of that not being the case next year, but when you're betting on MVP, you're betting that will improve, will stay the course, or maybe even improve. And I think that's what we're all hoping for. So I don't think I'm breaking any crazy news to say that Lauri Markkinen is probably our MVP next year.
Yeah, hot take over here, man. It's Larry. It's going to be Larry. The thing is, like, the margin of his production compared to everyone else last year was so wide, and I think he could probably, like you said, possibly even regress a little bit, and it would still be Larry, just based off of his size, his skill set, his efficiency. It's Larry's still our best player, and that's not going to change last year unless, Keyonte George and Taylor Hendricks we can end up being absolute revelations.
Which, if that happens, we will certainly not complain. Yeah, Markkinen is the very, very clear decision here. I think what's going to be interesting is that while we have talked about the possibility of regression based on the amount of players we got this season and the types of players we got this season, I think there's actually an argument now that's fairly strong that he could even have a better statistical season than he did last year. I think with John Collins and Taylor Hendricks, I think he's going to get some more help at that forward position, especially in terms of rebounding from John Collins, and then just having Taylor Hendricks in the rotation. I think that it's possible that he'll be able to shine even more within that role. And then potentially having somebody like a Keyonte George, who may be a gifted passer early in his career, that could also open up some more opportunities for him. So even though he was the very clear person of this is who it's almost certainly going to be for this season, I think the Jazz have done a good job on building a roster that helps Markkinen become the best version of Markkanen, even though I still think he's better at the 4 than the 3. I think there's just a lot of solid skill sets around him that will allow him to truly shine in his role with the Jazz, which I think is great.
Yeah, and I think defensively he's going to look better too. Not that he looked bad last year, he didn't, but I think with the help that he's going to have in the front court defensively, he's going to be very much able to specialize more on his matchup and the type of matchups that he's going to get. So I don't think he's going to be caught on bad matchups anymore. So I think you're going to see his defensive numbers look a lot better as well.
Yeah, I think Agbaji playing more minutes at the perimeter is probably going to help a little bit with that as well. And John Collins, when he wants to be, isn't a slouch on defense. So it'll certainly be interesting to see how a almost All-NBA season from Lauri Markkanen could turn into All-NBA second team, All-NBA third team this year. I guess we'll see. We're certainly rooting for it.
Who beat him on that third team spot?
I think, let me see. All-NBA.
It was LeBron.
Julius Randle and LeBron. I think we're all.
Julius Randle, get out of here.
Well, yeah,
he played good down the stretch.
Here's the thing.
Sure.
Team success is a factor, and also the Jazz just weren't playing Lowry down the stretch because they wanted to lose basketball games, which is why. And the Knicks were a 4 or 5 seed, and they just wanted to have them have an NBA. I don't mind him being snubbed, even though if you take it objectively, Lowry was better than Julius. I think last year. Watch some random New York Knicks fan enter our comments now, but all
I'm saying is ask Knicks fans who they would rather have. That's all I'm saying.
Donovan Mitchell is their answer.
Donovan Mitchell is always the answer. Yeah, should be fun. All right, moving on to the next award, Defensive Player of the Year. I think this is another one that's fairly clear, but I think you can make an argument. Landon, who do you think is most likely to be our Defensive Player of the Year next year?
Walker Kessler is the obvious answer. Maybe for the sake of argument, I'm going to say Taylor Hendricks.
Ooh,
I think that's why we got him. I think his versatility is going to be incredibly valuable. I think he can guard multiple positions. Walker can only guard one. It's kind of like a, Rudy Gobert versus Draymond Green debate. Do you want someone who's absolutely elite at one thing or someone who's very good at doing several things? And I think Taylor Hendricks is going to show his defensive instincts and his defensive skill set right away.
Yeah, that's one guy I really wish we would have seen play some basketball by now. But hey, I respect going for the long shot odds, man. You can throw $10 on that and win some big money. But I'm going to go with the favorite. So far, there have been no hard questions. And as chalky as it is, and maybe that's not the best podcasting, but I'm going to say what I truly feel every time. I'm not going to have a take just for the sake of it. So I'll go Walker Kessler.
If I was a betting man, I would also take Kessler, although I certainly appreciate the hot take from Landon with Hendricks. If he can be our best defensive player next season, that would just be gorgeous. I think a dark horse for this one, even though I'd still take Kessler, is Agbaji. The dude just looks incredible physically. And even though he was playing summer league guys, just how well he was able to guard in the perimeter with his size and his athleticism and his speed, he looks incredibly comfortable out there. And I think just he has the potential to be our best perimeter defender this season, which obviously in a league that shoots a lot of three-pointers can be extremely valuable. So I still think Kessler is the favorite. But I think if you look at total defensive impact, just because of what he can do on the perimeter, I think that Agbaji is someone that should at least be given odds for, even if he's not the favorite.
I mean, he's certainly
he
a good defender
in summer league for sure.
Yeah, and he showed up. He was a good defender last year as well as in the NBA. But I just feel like if you're talking deep way guards, I want he's like a good guard defender. I don't know if he's and maybe some threes, but you're talking about like super impactful guard defenders. They usually can defend forwards a little bit more, and I just want to see that more from Osha. I'd say before I'd probably have him honestly even behind Taylor Hendricks right now, just because I think Hendricks has more defensive versatility. If you're talking about versatile defenders.
Yeah, which is certainly fair. It's like I think that he'd be very successful overall guarding ones and twos. I think when you start getting into the 3 range, I don't know if he has quite the size and the length to be able to do that effectively. Hopefully he's able to show us that he's maybe better than that, but I think that's certainly a fair criticism.
Would love him to show it. I would love for all of our guys to be all defensive. I'd like the first all team defense Utah Jazz starting lineup. That'd be sick. Love it.
I would cry tears of joy.
It's not going to happen. That was never happened in the history of the league. We're not a particularly great defensive team, but hey, I would love it.
Only one way to go, right? Up. Let's go up defensively. All right, moving on to the next one. This is the first one I think is going to be a little bit interesting, which is Rookie of the Year. Obviously, we took Taylor Hendricks at 9, and then we took Keyonte George at 16. What makes this interesting is that Keyonte George has impressed and exceeded expectations in pretty much every way so far, and despite being the later pick, where we haven't even seen Hendricks play in a Utah Jazz uniform yet. If you had to bet right now, who would you bet would it be? Because for me, I'm just going to say that with Keyonte playing as well as he is, I don't think Sensabaugh really has much of a shot, as much as I love him and I love the pick at 28. But I think it's clearly between, is it going to be the higher pick we haven't seen yet or the lower pick who has continued to impress in everything so far?
You go first, Landon.
Yeah. This to me brings up the classic debate of like impact versus like box score stats, because I think Keyonte George is going to have a better stat line than Taylor Hendricks is. He's going to have the ball in his hand more. He's going to have more highlight plays. But I think Taylor Hendricks might be the more impactful player, specifically because of what he brings to the table defensively and his force placing ability. He hasn't shown the ability to create his own shot, which is a disadvantage to him. But I don't think he's going to be a slouch offensively. I think, he's going to be put into situations where he's going to be a good scorer. So I'm going to go with impact, and I'm going to say Taylor Hendricks is going to be the better of the rookies.
Yeah, I wanted you to go first because I could argue either one, and you laid out the argument I would have said for Taylor Hendricks. I think the scoring volume might not be there, but I think the efficiency will, because he's not going to need to really create shots for himself. Keyonte, though, I mean, if what we saw translates, he's not only going to, bring volume, but he's also going to bring good efficiency with it. And what that does is that means impact as well. Maybe not as much two-way impact as Taylor, but I feel like if you can choose between one guy that's really good at offense and no good at defense and vice versa, you're going with offense all day, every day. And so everyone loves a good offensive player. Everyone loved Donovan, even though his defensive impact throughout his tenure with Utah was terrible. I think it's almost like overstated how bad he was by some Jazz fans now that he's gone, though. He was bad. He wasn't like the worst defender in the league like some people think he was. But
seems like he got worse, but anyway.
He did get bad. And I felt like the last year, I felt like it was more he was done with the team than anything else. But yeah. So I think it's really close. I would honestly, though, take Keyonte. As much as I'm hoping that this is avoiding recency bias, he's just proven to be a better prospect than he was projected out of Baylor. So far, he's shown a skill set that he didn't show at Baylor, in terms of his able to not only pass well, which he showed flashes of, he's doing that more consistently while limiting turnovers. That's a big thing. Limiting turnovers is going to really help him, I think, be a positive impact to a full player on the offensive side if he can continue that at the NBA level.
And I completely agree with both your arguments, which I wish I could be a little more
just say sensible,
argumentative. Man. Dude, I still love Sensabaugh. I don't think he's going to be good now, but I think he could be actually extremely impactful potentially down the road. Love that dude. I think a lot of what it's going to come down to, because I think your arguments were great on both of them, was who can crack the starting lineup first. If either of them can or really cement their spot as a starter. I can see a future where Taylor Hendricks is able to move into that starting role. Same with Keyonte. I think a lot of it's just going to depend on how good is John Collins this year, or similarly, how quickly can maybe Keyonte maybe break that lineup to play with Jordan Clarkson as opposed to Agbaji or somebody else. So I think a lot of it's going to just depend on how quickly they establish themselves as a starting caliber player. And I think that it's possible for both of them. But if I had to guess as of right now, I would go with Keyonte. I just think that the box stats are going to make it more likely on that end that I think he's definitely going to be able to score and pass. So I'd give the slight edge to Keyonte, although I think they both have very close to equal odds right now.
Good problem to have for sure.
Great problem to have. All right. Most improved player. There's a lot of candidates for this one.
There's really two that stand out once again for me. I'm gonna go with John Collins, though. I think he's very clearly happy to be in Utah and out of that Atlanta situation. And he had kind of a career low last year since his rookie year. And I think I really like Will Hardy. I'm excited to see what he does with him. And I just think he's the guy that's proven that he can be much better than he was last year already. And I think the change of scenery is gonna help him be that better player.
I'm gonna say Colin Sexton. I think he was hurt a lot of last year, so I don't think we really saw him at his full potential. Seems like he's completely bought in. Not sure if you noticed or not, he's got his own like YouTube channel. He's kind of been posting, documenting his summer here in Utah and trying to work out and get better, which is kind of a good watch. But he seems bought in. He seems committed. He seems committed to improving. I think there's a very good chance he's going to be starting going into the season. So I think we're going to see him get a lot of minutes. And I think we're going to see a lot more from him than what we did last year.
Yeah. I think both of those are good options. I'm going to actually go with the third option. So, and this is actually who I would pick. I think Agbaji's going to have a good breakout season. Last year, he only averaged 8 points, 2 rebounds, and 1 assist in about 20 minutes per game. And I think just based on how good his shooting looked and his defensive impact this year, I think he's going to be in a great position to see all of his stats increase. I think John Collins, if he makes a splash, then he's going to make the bigger splash. But I think Agbaji might be the safer bet. I think that going from his rookie season to his sophomore season I think he's just going to understand the game more. I think he felt a lot more comfortable. Like just seeing how comfortable he looked playing in Summer League was one of the biggest things that stand out to me because he looked like an NBA player amongst a bunch of Summer League guys. And I think he's going to be in a position that even though it may not be the flashiest, most improved player resume, I think he's certainly going to see just his stats, his impact increase across the entire basketball playing spectrum. That will make him maybe not the sexiest pick for this, but I think that you can make a very strong argument that he will consistently get better throughout the season.
Yeah, he was my second of the guys that came to mind for me other than Collins, but it's very interesting that the 3 guys we just mentioned are the 3 guys most likely to keep the rookies out of the starting lineup, and we all are choosing them for most improved player. So cracking the starting lineup could be more difficult than a lot of us are predicting because Oshai and Sexton are the 2 people that George has to beat out, and Collins is the guy that Hendricks has to beat out.
Very true.
Rotations are going to be fascinating next year.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see what Hardy does with it.
Dude. I can't wait till we're like 75 games into the season, and then we're going to be watching a game and that stat's going to pop up where it's like the Jazz have had 17 different starting lineups this season. And we're just going to sit there and laugh because they're all going to be completely different depending on injury and based on who's able to break out. So certainly a great problem to have. The Jazz, I have no idea what the Jazz are going to look like on starting day, let alone last game of the season. And it'll certainly be interesting to see how it goes because there's just way too many variables with young guys who continue to get better, who have a lot of potential. And we're just going to see who hits and who doesn't. All right. Another fun one that I think is up for debate here, but 6th man of the year.
You go, Landon.
6th man of the year. I'm going to say Kelly Olynyk. I don't think he starts. I think he's going to come off the bench and just be that glue guy, that impact player, that kind of stabilizing force with the second unit. So assuming keep Kelly Olynyk, he's my guy.
This one's a tough one because, as we just discussed, who's starting and who's on the bench. There's only like a couple guys on the roster that you're confident won't be starting. So Kelly Olynyk's a good choice just based on that, because he's one of the few guys that you're confident won't really get much starting time without injury, of course. I'm going to say Collins, Sexton. I think there's a good chance he might start the year starting, but I think one of Agbaji and Keyonte George is going to take his spot by the end. And I just feel like the Jazz last year really liked Collins in that kind of off the bench, just go get a bucket kind of guard role, which is what we've had Jordan Clarkson on as in our previous iteration of the team. I think Sexton by the end is going to get plenty of minutes, but as the sixth man, I think, which is his best role as well. So that's what I'll choose here.
Man, we're going to be all three different again this year. For this one. I'm going to go with Taylor Hendricks, and here's why. I think Taylor Hendricks is going to be immediately impactful on both ends of the ball. I just think it's going to be really tough for him to break that starting lineup this season with John Collins. He's coming off a year low. Last season was his worst season, which we've documented in our previous podcasts. But I think that the change of scenery, I think playing alongside Markkanen and Kessler, I think John Collins is going to be a lot better this year, and it's going to be more difficult for Taylor Hendricks to break the starting lineup than maybe some of our other rookies, despite the fact that he's going to be really good. And John Collins, he's coming into his prime right now, or he should be based on his age. So I think purely just based on the fact that I think it's maybe not as likely for Hendricks to break the starting lineup as some of these other guys, that I think he'll qualify for the award. But the minutes he does play, especially against that maybe lower tier competition, he's going to look really, really good. So I'm going to go with Hendricks.
So if let's say they're both really good. Hendricks is really good out the gate, and John Collins is really good out the gate. Do you think the Jazz just keep Collins in the starting lineup?
That's tough because I can see both ways. I think that they might keep Collins in the starting lineup in that situation purely because A, they're paying him quite a bit of money, and B, I think that a lot of the reason why they got him could be to make him a better trade asset down the road. And to be a good trade asset, you got to play significant minutes and have good stat line. And on top of that, I don't know. I think it's not incredibly likely that Hendricks is really, really good, like as good as John Collins right out the bat. I think he can be very impactful, but he's still a young rookie, so I think it might take him a little bit longer to develop. So, yeah, I would say that even if they're both looking pretty good, I still think it's more likely that Collins gets the start, at least for this first year, and then maybe see what happens down the road.
I think I agree with that. I think Collins would have to play really bad to not keep that starting role. I think he's kind of earned that by virtue of his tenure in the league, by the respect that he's garnered, that he's going to get that starting position. Minutes is an interesting question, though. I don't know who's going to end up playing more minutes. I think there are lineups that exist where you play them both at the same time. So maybe it won't be as much of a conflict as we think, hopefully. But I think, yes or no, I think Collins is going to be the dude who's going to start for pretty much the whole year.
Which I think you had an awesome question there, Kyler, because I think that comes back.
Let me answer my own question, please.
Yeah, go for it.
There's a history in really most of major sports that you want to protect your investments. One player you invested the 9th overall pick in, the other you invested Rudy Gay in a second. So I think if Hendricks, I'm not saying he will, if Hendricks is doing really, really well, that's the person you're invested in. Rudy Gay in the second isn't invested. Yeah, you're paying him a lot. That's because you had to. Like, you have to get to a certain amount of roster salary. Like, they didn't pay John Collins that. They paid a second and Rudy Gay for John Collins. And so does that mean I think Taylor Hendricks will start this year? Not necessarily, but I think if he's doing really well, there's a lot of history in sports that the guy that you invested in is going to be the one that gets featured. So just putting that out there.
Which I think that's why it was such a great question. I mean, if they're both really good, they both play a similar position, they have a lot of similar skill sets, and the type of investment is very different, but then the tenure is different. And even with John Collins last year averaging 13 and 7, like that's still a solid stat line for a starting power forward. So I think it'll certainly be interesting to see what the rotations look like. But yeah, it just comes back to that conversation we had a few minutes ago. Our rotations, I have no idea what they're going to look like next year, which is going to be incredibly fun because I think the Jazz are going to have like this purest form of meritocracy where the best players are going to get to play and they're going to be able to earn their spots. And I think it's going to be that's certainly what you hope for. And I think the Jazz are better at it than most. I mean, I think Will Hardy, especially being a young coach, I think that he's shown a willingness to move lineups around and to be flexible with the team that he has. So I think we will certainly see that. If Taylor Hendricks deserves it, I think he's going to get the start. I just don't know if it's incredibly likely that he's going to quote unquote deserve the start.
I don't think it's that likely either. Just saying if it happens, I think he will start over John Collins.
For sure. All right. Last major award, Coach of the Year. I'm totally kidding.
Jason Terry.
We still have Jason Terry?
For sure.
Yeah. Either way. But just with that, with the Coach of the Year, just shout out our guy, Will Hardy. We talked about in our season last year about our different coaching preferences, and we didn't talk as much about Hardy, but just give him some love right now because he last year was, I think, better than any of us would have expected. I thought that he was going to be good when he came into the Jazz, but I didn't think he would necessarily be as good as he was in his first season. So I'm ecstatic to have Will Hardy with the Utah Jazz. I've been super impressed with him so far, and it certainly gives me a lot more hope for some of these young guys because giving Taylor Hendricks and Keyonte George, Bryce Sensabaugh, and other young players that are still developing, like a Colin Sexton, being able to hand them over to a guy like Will Hardy just gives you a lot of hope that whatever the best version of this player is, Will Hardy and his staff can probably find it. So even though he may not be a Coach of the Year candidate this year because the Jazz probably won't win quite enough games, I think we definitely have one of the top, I don't know, maybe 6, 7, 8 coaches in professional basketball, and super grateful to have him with the Jazz.
Yeah, seems really smart. I think he helped us exceed expectations next year. And I think he's shown a willingness and ability to be very flexible, which is exactly what we're going to need going into this next season. So awesome. We're lucky to have him.
Also the number one thing we were hoping for in our next coach. And so a lot of it seems like NBA or Jazz Twitter, I should say, a lot of them are really sad we didn't tank more, which there's certainly an argument. Like, we talked a lot about Keyonte George. Scoot Henderson looked incredible for the quarter that he played before he got injured, too. So when that happened, everyone was like, oh, why didn't we tank? Which I don't want to get into that conversation right now because there's a lot of stuff that goes along with that. But I just feel like, how are you not more grateful that we hit on a head coach and that we hit on all these things? Like, one draft pick versus all these things that look like they've hit. Come on. And you guys know, I argued pro Scoot being incredible so many times on this podcast. I'd still rather have a coach I really believe in Will Hardy, a guy that I really believe in Lauri Markkanen, and still have this large pile of assets. I don't know. I think last offseason, even though I wanted to take a ton, I'm still happy with what the Jazz did last year because we're in a better spot than I thought we would have been.
I agree. Well, Kyler Landon, it's that fun part of the offseason where we're going to get to dive into a lot of very, very fun topics over the next couple of weeks as we wait for more basketball to be played. One plug that we do want to put in there is that we've had a lot of requests from our fans and from other people in our lives to get on Twitter. So we have done that for you this week. We are now on Twitter at UpperBowlPer. You can see us with the same logo, that same yellow basketball logo that we use for our podcast. So we will be on there pretty regularly, just posting about Jazz stuff and commenting on other Jazz things as well. It's brand new. Don't have a lot going on there right now, but we will have a lot more Jazz content on that Twitter feed going forward. So if you're on Twitter, if you like our content, give us a follow. We would love to interact with you across multiple platforms. This has been another episode of the Upper Bowl Perspective. Thanks for tuning in. Go Jazz, and we will be back next week with some all new content.